Chapter 4 of Beowulf. This is on page 400 of your textbook. Beowulf descends to the underwater den of Grendel's mother, where he kills her. Then he returns to Geatland. Beowulf put on his battle garments. "I have no fear for my life," he declared. "My ring-mesh battle-shirt, hand-linked and hand-joined, will protect my body from any sea serpent's battle-stroke or frightful battle-grip." And that clever smith covered the face of my age-old war-helmet with battle-ready bores, so that no sword-blade can bite through it. So Beowulf spoke, and it came to pass that Unferth, the foremost fighter of the Spear-Danes, now forgot the taunting words that mead had led him to speak. He knew that he lacked the bold heart and the battle-skill to do a warrior's duty and risk his life beneath the blood-filled waves. And so he offered Beowulf his own blood-hardened, sharp-bladed battle-sword. "Beowulf, take Hrunting with you," he said. "It is one of the most valued of the age-old treasures, war-tested and true, for its battle-blade is iron-edged and blood-hardened, and its shining serpent shapes are deadly. Many warriors who have wielded it have tread ways of terror, but Hrunting has never betrayed anyone who has clasped it in battle." "Thank you, my friend," replied Beowulf. "I will be glad to have such a trusted friend, and I will win glory with Hrunting, or I will be beaten in battle. And then death will take my life, for I will not run from my destiny. Weird always weaves as it must. But you must take my own sharp-bladed battle-sword, for it, too, is a trusted, age-old war-weapon." Beowulf was now battle-ready for whatever danger his daring journey would bring. And so he said to Hrothgar, "Remember, my lord, should death take my life, you must care for my war-comrades. Send the treasure you gave me to my king. I want him to know what a gracious ring-giver you are, and how rewarded I was for my deeds while I lived." So Beowulf spoke, and with these words he climbed down the rough-hewn rocks to the bottom of the cliff-wall. There he walked to the shore of the loathsome lake and plunged into its swirling and seething, blood-filled waves. Beowulf sank deep and ever deeper beneath the lake face, and the sun, that bright candle of the world, glided high into the heavens and shone forth over the land. Still Beowulf sank ever deeper beneath the lake face, and then the sun began to glide toward its home. But still Beowulf sank ever deeper beneath the lake face. At last, beneath the floodwaters, he felt his feet touch the firm lake floor. Grendel's mighty mother had guarded the floodwaters' depths for 50 winters, and now she spied Beowulf as he searched for her secluded sea-cave. At first the warrior did not see her, but suddenly her frightful face swam before his eyes in the murky waters. Swift as a warrior's sword-stroke, the giant seized him, and she held him in a grasp that was stronger than the storm-wind. And as she clutched him in her terrible claws, she tried to find his flesh. She wanted to bite into it with her frightful teeth and give him a gruesome death-wound. But she could not even scratch his skin, for her foul, iron-nailed fingers could not tear through his ring-meshed battle-shirt. And so that mighty mother carried Beowulf toward her lonely lair. And as strong as he was, Beowulf could not wield his battle-weapons. So it came to pass that many strange sea-beasts pressed their treacherous tusks close to him, and they were able to break through his stout, ring-meshed war-shirt and scratch his skin. Soon Beowulf found himself in a sheltered sea-cave deep beneath the flood-waters. It was a high-roofed hall where no water could enter. Bright firelight flickered upon the walls, and against it Grendel's mighty mother cast a shadow, ghastly and grim. Safe within her lonely lair, the giant relaxed her grasp, and as swift as a warrior's sword-stroke, Beowulf raised Hrunting, Unferth's sharp-bladed battle-sword, and he smashed that mighty mother upon her head with such strength that the blood-hardened blade sang its greedy war-song. But that blood-thirsting war-weapon could not bite the flesh or break the life of that wondrous woman. Its iron-edged, blood-hardened battle-blade betrayed Beowulf in his time of greatest need. In the past, Hrunting, that battle-friend of heroes, had bitten through many a hard war-helmet and ring-meshed battle-shirt, and so it had given gruesome wounds that had doomed warriors to death. But now Unferth's treasured war-sword won no glory. Beowulf's heart flooded with a surging sea-swell of rage. He angrily threw Hrunting aside, and now He put his trust in his own mighty battle grip. For every man must rely upon his own strength in battle, and the warrior who wants to win glory and lasting fame must put aside all fear of death, that dreaded destiny. So Beowulf eagerly seized Grendel's mother by the shoulders. He was so bold-hearted and swollen with wrath that he could throw her to the ground. But swift as a warrior's sword stroke, the mighty giant clasped him in her own frightening battle grip. She pushed and pulled him, and Beowulf's spirit sank as he struggled to survive. He was the strongest of warriors, but Grendel's mother was stronger than the storm wind. And so, at last, Beowulf staggered and fell to the floor of her high-roofed hall. Grendel's mighty mother hurled herself upon her foe, and then she drew forth her broad, sharp-bladed dagger. And Beowulf, the foremost fighter of the war-geats, would have met death there in that sheltered sea-cave, deep beneath the flood-waters, but the stout mesh of his hand-linked battle-shirt saved him. The hand-joined chain-links withstood the thrust of that giant's dagger-point and blood-hardened blade. Those ring-links shielded his chest and sheltered his life. And holy God, wise Lord and ruler of heaven, granted Beowulf good fortune in battle, for Beowulf was bold of heart and strong in strife. And so, swift as a warrior's sword stroke, Beowulf now pushed away the mighty giant and sprang to his feet. Beowulf then spied a wondrous age-old battle-sword hanging upon the wall of the sea-cave. In a bygone age it had been forged and fashioned by a giant smith for those of his race, and now the mightiest of men could not bear this weapon into battle. But Beowulf's heart was flooded with surging sea-swells of rage and fury, and so he seized that wondrous war-weapon, and he let it sing its greedy war-song. But God had woven defeat for Grendel's mighty mother, and so she had no good fortune in battle. And it came to pass that, in Beowulf's hand, the blood-thirsting battle-blade of the giant sword slashed into her neck with such savage strength that it broke her bones and sliced through her body. And Grendel's mighty mother, beaten in battle, dropped to her death at Beowulf's feet. Beowulf gazed at the blood-smeared battle-blade of the giant sword, and he gloried in his great deed. Then, suddenly, the fire that had lighted the wall of the sheltered sea-cave blazed forth, and it filled the lonely lair with light as bright as the sun, heaven's jewel. And so it came to pass that Beowulf could search the cave floor for Grendel. At last he found the frightful fiend's lifeless, broken body. Beowulf then swung the wondrous giant sword with such an angry blow that, once again, it sang its greedy war-song, and it separated Grendel's loathsome head from his lifeless body. Above, the bright heavens would soon darken with the shadows of dusk. 8 hours had passed, and the 9th hour was upon them, but King Hrothgar and the 2 groups of war comrades were still patiently keeping their long cliff watch. Suddenly, the face of the frightful floodwaters began to swell and swirl with a new surge of blood-filled waves. The bright Danes were sure that Grendel's mighty mother had slain Beowulf. Their hearts flooded with a surging sea-swell of sorrow, and they decided to leave the headland and return to Heorot. But the sea-geats sat there still, keeping their cliff watch. They stared into the frightful, blood-filled flood-waters of that loathsome lake, and their hearts flooded with a surging sea-swell of despair. They dared not hope to see their leader and lord, but they were as rooted to the edge of the cliff wall as the trees that leaned gloomily out from the rough-hewn rocks. Below, in the sheltered sea-cave, deep beneath the flood-waters, Beowulf was watching the boiling blood and gore of the frightful fiend and his mighty mother feast upon the giant sword's battle-blade. For just as ice begins to melt when God, who rules the time and seasons, breaks the frost bonds and unwinds the flood fetters, so the broad battle-blade now burned up. Beowulf saw many treasures in that lonely lair, but he decided to take nothing but Grendel's gruesome head and the wondrous jeweled hilt of the giant sword. And carrying one in each hand, he swam up to the lake face. The frightful floodwaters now slept beneath the clouds, calm and still, but the boiling blood and gore from the cave below had risen, and so the lake face was still clothed in a gruesome color. Beowulf swallowed the fresh air and feasted his eyes upon the golden glow of the cloud-filled sky. His heart flooded with a surging sea-swell of joy as he swam to shore and began to climb the rough-hewn rocks to the top of the cliff wall. His war comrades jumped to their feet and cheered. Then they went forth to join him, for they were joyful at the safe return of their leader and lord. And they delighted in his battle skill and good fortune. When, at last, Beowulf and his war band left the lonely lake, it took all the strength of 4 men to carry Grendel's gruesome head upon their spear shafts. Again they crossed the moorland, murky and wild, loathsome and lonely, and again danger greeted them on all sides of the high headland, and the rope-thin footpath was filled with peril. But they walked carefully and with good cheer, and at last they made their way through the woodland and back to Hrothgar's tower-tall, timbered mead-hall. The bright heavens had long since darkened with the shadows of dusk, and at last Beowulf and his war comrades walked up the stone-cobbled street toward the Heorot, that bright hall of bold-hearted men. The king, with his gentle-mannered queen, and the high-born noblemen among the Ring-Danes were still in the high, horn-gabled mead-hall, where they had gathered for their evening meal. But Beowulf and his war comrades did not hear the sounds of the harp and the happy songs of heroes, for the Ring-Danes were sure that death, that dreaded destiny, had taken the life of the war-geat who was their shield and spear, and every heart was now flooded with sorrow. But suddenly, in the sad silence, the Spear-Danes heard the clattering, iron battle-song of Beowulf's war-band, and then, swift as a warrior's sword-stroke, Beowulf, boldest of heart and strongest in strife, strode into the Hall of Heroes. He walked toward the mead benches, dragging Grendel's gruesome head by its hair, and bearing the hilt of the wondrous giant sword. King Hrothgar and every Ring-Dane jumped to his feet and cheered, and then they ran to join the hero, for they were joyful at his safe return, and they were eager to gaze in wonder at the tokens of his battle skill and good fortune. As soon as he would be heard, Beowulf unlocked his word hoard. "My lord, my heart floods with joy, for I have brought you these tokens, gruesome and glorious, of my good fortune," he declared. "My struggle with Grendel's mighty mother was stern and savage, for she was stronger than the storm wind. First, she tried to steal my life by clutching me in her terrible claws and chewing my flesh with her terrible teeth. Then she tried her blood-hardened, sharp-pointed battle-knife, but the stout mesh of my hand-linked battle-shirt saved me from her foul, iron-nailed fingers and her blood-thirsting battle-blade, for those hand-joined ring-links shielded my chest and sheltered my life. Then that mighty mother tried to kill me by crushing my limbs. I barely escaped from her frightful battle-grip. And then Hrunting sang its greedy war-song, but its blood-thirsting battle-blade could not help me, for it could not bite the flesh or break the life of that wondrous woman. And so, that treasured war-sword, that best of battle-blades, won no glory. Then, holy God, ruler of men, who often guides the friendless, shielded me. He showed me a wondrous, age-old battle-sword. Suddenly I saw it hanging upon the wall of that sheltered sea-cave, deep beneath the flood-waters. It had been forged and fashioned by a giant smith for those of his race, but it could still sing its greedy battle-song. And so, I slew Grendel's mighty mother, and then I separated Grendel's loathsome head from his lifeless body. Their boiling blood and gore burned up that wondrous battle-blade. But I have brought you Grendel's gruesome head and the wondrous hilt of that giant sword, for these tokens show that death, that dreaded destiny, has taken God's foes, that frightful fiend and his mighty mother. And so, from this time forth, you and your war comrades can sleep free from care in this high, horn-gabled hall." So Beowulf spoke, and with these words he placed the jeweled sword hilt into the hand of the joyful old war-king. The hilt depicted the age-old tale of the frightful flood. Those rushing waters had ravaged and ruined the giant race because they had lived lawlessly. Decorated with dragon shapes, the age-old letters still told that terrifying tale. The smiling, treasure-giving old king gazed at the wondrous gift in his hand, and then he looked up at Beowulf and unlocked his word hoard, for the old war-king had wise words to share with the young warrior who stood before him. "My son, folk and lands near and far will know of your name," he declared, "and so maintain your war might with a wise heart. Be a comfort to the Geat folk and a help to your war comrades. Like you, old King Heremod towered in strength above other men, but he became bloodthirsty. he let his heart flood with surging sea swells of anger toward his own folk, and so he killed his own comrades. Heremod lived for himself alone, and so he lived without joy. He suffered for his vengeful deeds, and he died as he had lived, alone. Mighty God rules all things. He permits a high-born nobleman to want to gain and keep power, land, and treasure, and so such a man can satisfy his every wish. The shadows of sickness and old age do not bother him. Sorrow does not darken his spirits, and strife does not threaten his kingdom. All the world bends to his will. And so, that man does not realize that pride is growing within him. He decides that he does not possess enough power and wealth, and so he greedily keeps his gold rings. If he is not careful, a poisoned war shaft suddenly strikes him in the chest, for the blessings of God, the King of Glory, blind him to the future and his inevitable destiny. But in the end, his body dies, as it must, and another king acquires all his possessions. You are now a far-famed warrior, Beowulf. For a while you will be in the flower of your strength, but later the sword blade's bite or the spear shaft's flight, the flood water's frightful grip or the flaming fire's grasp, sickness or sad old age will rob you of your strength. Your bright eyes will dim and darken, and you will be beaten in battle or in soft sleep. And so, death, that dreaded destiny, will take your life, for it must. But enough of an old man's advice. Go now, taste the joy of the feast, and when bright daylight again shines forth over the land, I will give you many treasures. So Hrothgar spoke, and when the sun, that bright candle of the world, again shone forth over the land, the Weathergeats were eager to return to their homeland, and they were ready to cross the deep waters of the Whale Road, and so Beowulf gave Hrunting that age-old, blood-hardened battle-sword back to Unferth. And then Beowulf said to Hrothgar, My lord, we seafaring folk from afar are ready to return to Geatland. You have treated us well in every way. If ever I may do more to help you, I will be ready. If your neighbors attack you, I will come to your help with 1,000 warriors. Hygelac, my lord and king, is young, but he will support me in word and in deed. So Beowulf spoke, and to his words Hrothgar replied, Never have I heard one so young speak so wisely. If it comes to pass that the iron-tipped spear, the sharp-bladed battle-sword, or sickness kills your king, the Geat folk could have no better king than you. And while I am king, the Spear-Danes and the War-Geats will live together in peace. We will share treasures and tokens of love. Hrothgar then gave Beowulf 12 treasures, and tears fell from the white-haired king's eyes as he kissed the young warrior, for he loved him like a son. Beowulf was so dear to him that his heart hurt. He yearned to keep the young warrior in his own kingdom, and so his heart flooded with surging sea swells of grief and sorrow at their parting, for he knew that death, that dreaded destiny, would take him before he could look upon Beowulf's face and form again. And he feared for the future of his kingdom, for the warrior who was the shield and spear of the Dane folk was returning to Geatland. Beowulf, the gold-proud warrior, took his 12 treasures, and then he and his band of bold-hearted war comrades walked down the stone-cobbled street toward the sea-coast. The battle-ready boars, gold-glittering in stern, upon their hard war-helmets had kept watch over their lives, and their clanking ring-mesh battle-coats had kept death, that dreaded destiny, at bay. The warden welcomed them at the seashore. There they placed Hrothgar's gift hoard, the horses, the splendid battle gear, and the treasure trove, on board their ring-proud, broad-beamed boat. Beowulf then gave the ship's watchman an age-old, gold-hilted battle-sword, a treasure that would bring that warrior great respect among his comrades. So it came to pass that Beowulf, that safeguard of warriors, and his bold-hearted war comrades set out once again upon the deep waters of the Whale Road, and a brisk wind sent their bent-necked ship speeding across the sea-swell like a sea-bird, its curved prow like a foamy bill. The ship sailed forth to the lofty, sheer-cut sea-cliffs of Geatland. There the coast guard was ready and eager to welcome the war comrades home. King Hygelac had his mead hall prepared for a great celebration, and there Beowulf told the tale of his adventures to the warriors who had stayed behind in Geatland. He then set Hrothgar's gift hoard before his king, for these were royal gifts from one treasure-giving king to another. King Hygelac then rewarded Beowulf for his deeds of daring and danger. He gave the far-famed warrior an age-old gold-hilted sword, Naegling, that was the best of treasures among the Weathergeats, a prince's high seat, a fine hall, and a large estate. And so Beowulf was now the most highly honored of men.